My name is J.L. Howard. I'm 67 years old. I spent almost 24 years in the Army. I was a combat medic in Vietnam. I'm 100% disabled because of Vietnam, what they call an active war. My wife and my family has lived in Beavercreek since 1984. I have post-traumatic stress disorder plus some other medical problems. I asked in 1997 the Ohio Board of Zoning and Appeals in Beavercreek for the city of Beavercreek to give me special permission to build a higher fence on a certain area of my property because of my post-traumatic stress disorder. I'm 100% disabled because of that act of war. The Beavercreek, Ohio Board of Zoning and Appeals and the Beavercreek City Council turned down my request. They told me they did not recognize the Americans with Disabilities Act. I can say after living in Beavercreek, after all these years, Beavercreek politicians think of Beavercreek as its own little country. After the Zoning Appeals Board and the City Council turned down my request, I filed a federal lawsuit. Meanwhile, my older son, who has ADHD with a learning disability, was being bullied on the bus by other kids. One time, my son's shirt was torn off while he was on the school bus. When I became upset with the school, the Beavercreek City School Administration suspended my son for 3 days. Also, the lawsuit I filed was dismissed by the federal court by legal officers in the court that received their appointments from a certain politician who I will talk with you about later. Coincidentally, my son was 12 years old at the time of the incident with the Beavercreek police through the school administration. Shortly after, I asked the Beavercreek schools to send my son to school outside of Beavercreek because they were not giving him a free, appropriate public education, FAP, which is supposed to happen with kids with disabilities. And that also falls under Americans with Disabilities Act. They refused in violation of the federal law on protecting kids with disabilities with the appropriate public education. I was told by school administration they would not pay to send him outside the school district, that I could either pay to do this or wait until he was 16 and send him to MMRD where they would teach him to push a broom. I pulled my son out of Beavercreek schools and sent him to another school at our expense. His grade, which were C's and D's and some F's in Beavercreek, started to become A's and B's. This son is in his last 8 months of finishing a master's degree. I pulled our younger son 1 year later and sent him to other schools at our expense. Now he's in his second year of college. He also has a disability. The only thing that Beavercreek schools care about are if you're an honor student or an athlete, and that is what they go by. I had no dealings with the Beavercreek police until 2005. That was about 7 years after these incidents with my son. In 2005, a neighbor whose name I cannot say because the Fairborn, Ohio court has said that I cannot give his name on any type of electronics or any type of paper. This neighbor would let his dog come over to my yard to pee and do other business on my property. We asked him to either clean it up or not let his dog come over here. He refused. I went to the Greene County Animal Control. They came out. The dog was standing by this neighbor, and this neighbor told Animal Control this dog never leaves this side. I waited a few days and got a picture of the dog doing his business in my backyard. I took the picture to County Animal Control, and they said they needed an eyewitness. This is a very ridiculous statement, and that shows the politics in Greene County, especially when you're a different political party, and we are moderate Democrats, We lived in the city of Beavercreek, Ohio, which is 99.9% neo-conservative Republican. And the city of Beavercreek knew what my political party was. I presented the picture to the Greene County commissioners. In turn, they sent it to Beavercreek city prosecutor, who was at that time a different person from the present prosecutor, who now takes care of Fairborn and Beavercreek, Ohio. The neighbor pleaded guilty and was fined $95. Since 2005, this neighbor has been very vengeful. After this incident, this neighbor and his wife would sit in their front yard and give us the finger when we came out of our driveway. This continued until his wife left him in October or November of 2005. She came back in late 2011 or early 2012. Within a month after the problem with the dog and the neighbor paying out the fine, he stepped on the street 2 times and he was drunk and tried to get me to hit him with my truck as I pulled out of my driveway and started to drive east on our street. In 2008, my next door neighbor to the east tried to steal part of my land. He was and still is good friends with the neighbor who let his dog do his business in my yard. I was able to get my land back after the city had ordered me to tear down an old fence that was on my property that the neighbor on my east had built. I also had part of the neighbor's driveway cut because he had built some of that driveway on my land. The neighbor with the dog would run over to the neighbor on my east and talk with that family, but when the authorities showed up, he would run back to his house and watch from the window. The neighbor that tried to steal part of my land was convicted in Fairborn Court of threatening me. He was charged by a different city prosecutor from the one who is now the city prosecutor. There are witnesses to what the neighbor to my east tried to do and the neighbor across the street where the dog was doing. Before I could get my property back, I had a true survey done. The neighbor to the east had a survey done. Both surveys showed that the neighbors to the east had encroached on my land. The neighbors to the east called the Beavercreek Police Department and tried to give the impression that it was their surveyors calling the police, and they said that I had threatened them. 2 Beavercreek police officers showed up. Officers Brian Paquette and Sean Williams. They accused me of threatening the neighbor's surveyor. When my wife and I told them we did not threaten anyone, Officer Paquette said, "We cannot talk to these 2 people. They're not going to tell the truth." He accused me of lying. This was also in front of my sons. I went next door and talked to the neighbors they went next door and talked to the neighbors over 20 minutes. And the neighbor across the street was there too. The next morning I called the now retired police chief who checked the voice tapes, and he came to the conclusion that the neighbors to the east had called the police and not the surveyors. The police chief ordered the young Officer Williams to go to that company and get a statement from the owner. The owner not only gave him a statement, he also sent a letter to the police chief and a letter to me stating that no one from his company called the police and there was no threats to the employees. This shows that the neighbors to the east were trying to get some type of charge against me because of the charge against the neighbor. Young Officer Williams was forced to rewrite the police report that he already had submitted. This also shows the favoritism shown by some policemen to my neighbors. I will continue this report in a few minutes. Thank you.